Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us for another episode of the Daily BizLink. Jane Cebrynski is back, and today we are talking about emotional intelligence. Jane, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. All right, so before we get into it, give me a 10 moment.
My 10 moment of the week is actually based on some of the work that I'm doing around reflection. So I've been thinking through what I've been doing or what we accomplished in 2020 on a professional level and trying to think through, yes, we're looking at our business plan. We have a game plan generally in place for the new year. However, I think it's really important that we further reflect on our success, our accomplishments, maybe kind of where we fell a little bit short, to know, okay, what can we learn from that in order to implement new strategies and best practices into 2021? So yes, it's a lot of work, but I encourage everybody to take a hard look at that. It's still January. We're still ramping up for the new year. So now would be a good time to do that. So that's my 10 moment of the week.
Well, I love that. And, it kind of ties in with what we're talking about with respect to emotional intelligence, because it's super easy for us to look maybe where we fell short or we didn't, achieve what we wanted to and go down the path of really beating ourselves up emotionally. And then that doesn't really serve us. So just kind of being able to look at it from a neutral point of view without a whole lot of judgment around it, just simply to say, hey, let's look at our film. What can we learn from it? And how do we keep moving forward? Which is, of course, what I coach in on a regular basis and kind of what we're all about.
So we're talking about emotional intelligence. And I think this is such an important topic because as leaders, we really need to be aware of all of this. So Jane, what advice do you have for us today as it relates to this specific topic?
Well, emotional intelligence is very broad and there's a lot of depth and breadth to it. And, we've been living in a very emotional time. And that's kind of what, propelled it, the activities of the past couple of weeks and yesterday with emotions on all different, spectrums, and doing a deeper dive into it since we introduced it in our Win Wellbeing courses. And what I think is super cool is, most of the time we do not recognize that thoughts and emotions are not the same thing. Oftentimes we lump our thoughts and communicate them as an emotion. And truly, we've been given, just a small handful of emotions, and we've got a lot of thoughts around it. And so I was reading this article about, highly intelligent people, 8 traits of highly intelligent people. And one of them is that they can differentiate between thoughts and feelings. And ironically enough, this has been showing up in my personal life and my professional life quite a bit the last few weeks. So I thought it was super timely that here I'm reading this article on it. And I myself have been really delving more into this. What's your initial thought on that?
Well, but when you say it like that, it just causes you to think like, oh, that makes a lot of sense, but I've never thought of it that way. So as we try to differentiate the two, what are the tips for knowing the difference between thoughts and emotions?
Yeah, so, we have both, right? We can't deny that. But oftentimes, so we have really only kind of a small handful of emotions, from anger to sad to happy, jealousy, shame. And first and foremost, to not label them. Oftentimes we look at emotions as either good or bad, or positive and negative. And instead, just to see that we've got a range of emotions that we've been given, and none of them are good or bad. And that's the first level of awareness, because then what we do is when we label them, and again, that's the thought, right? Like it's a negative emotion, then we want to suppress it, or we want to judge ourselves, like I'm not supposed to feel that. And so we want to try to deny. And so one of the things I love that this author said is see emotions as a messenger, not a virus. So first thing, honor your feelings. And I like to say, feel the feelings, don't judge them. And then begin to recognize, like, are there thoughts that are driving that feeling? Thoughts about that? I mean, it's pretty heavy stuff. It's really heavy stuff, but it's also super amazing.
I think it's something that will require a little bit of work because I don't think it's going to be something that you could just turn on or off overnight.
No.
Like, oh, now that we understand how this works, I'll start thinking that way. But I agree. If you are more mindful of it, you may be a little bit more aware of, well, maybe some of your emotions are driving your thoughts and vice versa. Your thoughts may be driving your emotions. So, are there any questions that we can ask ourselves to help further differentiate the two?
Yes. So first of all, when the emotion shows up, when the feeling shows up, acknowledge the feeling. And then begin to acknowledge, is it being driven more by a thought than just the feeling itself showing up? And is the thought really true? So that's the other thing is, our mind doesn't always speak the truth. And sometimes we put too much weight into it. We give it too much credit. Now the mind is a beautiful, beautiful gift and it's a beautiful thing, but it can also be an enemy, if we let it take over. And the really cool thing is, so, the first question is to go, okay, so what are my thoughts around this? And sort of like, I'm going to use the word hold them captive, but, just hold them in their space. And then begin to ask yourself, like, okay, are these thoughts true? Like, is there some validity around it? And that's the real exercise, because if we have been using our thoughts as a way to push our emotions, then we might not recognize it right away. I mean, it becomes a practice, if you will. And then a lot of times it's the habit that we have around the feeling. So you may have it's like, if you talk about anxiety, it comes more from the habit of worrying. And so what are the thoughts that drive the worrying? And are they valid? Are they true? And then the question becomes like, how do they serve you? Because while we don't necessarily have control over our emotions, like they show up, we do have control over our thoughts, which then can change how we feel.
So, what advice do you have? Like, what should we be really focused in on here over the course of the next week? What is the challenge that you have for us, Jane?
I would say that the first baby step is acknowledge your feeling. Don't try to judge it. Don't try to label it yet. That might be too much in the beginning, but just recognize the feeling and really sit with it. Notice, is my chest tightening? Or if I'm super elated, like, what does my energy feel like? Because again, these are all good messengers for us. And if you see it as a messenger and not a virus, then you won't try to run from it. You'll just be like, okay, what's it trying to tell me? And then you get to move from there to start thinking in terms of like, is a thought driving this, or what pattern do I want to change around it? But the most important thing, first and foremost, is to not judge your thoughts. That already puts you at an emotionally intelligent space, because the more intelligent you are, the less likely you are to push it down and think of it as a bad thing and just simply acknowledge it.
So, emotional intelligence, such a big topic, and there's a lot of things that go into it. I know
Yeah.
you and your team are doing some work around this. So, would you mind sharing a little bit more about that?
Yeah, we have been talking about winning well-being, and that is truly our focus in 2021. So we have created a course around 10 intelligences, emotional intelligence being one of them. And if you go on to our winwellbeing.com website, you can sign up, be on a team, or you can also take each intelligence at a month at a time. Like, we're going to have a menu that's like, we're starting in February with economic intelligence, and you can do a deep dive into a particular intelligence that has some interest every month if you want to. So we're determined to win well-being. I call it whole being as well, and emotional intelligence is one of the biggest driving forces. And I think we've talked about before, like, one of the top interviewing, traits is now more so than IQ is EQ.
Yeah, I think this is something that we should all be focused in 2021. I mean, this is going to help set us up for success, both personally and professionally, and help us to grow. So If you need a little extra help with this, I know Jane is a tremendous resource. We also are hosting our Awesome Women in Business event next Tuesday afternoon, focused on reaching our full potential. And within that, we're talking about other strategies such as emotional intelligence and others that will help you to unlock and reach that full potential. So you guys, lots of opportunities, a lot of great resources out there, but start doing the work. The best investment you can make is in yourself. So Jane, thanks again for being here.
Thanks so much, Lindsay. Look forward to seeing you on Tuesday night.